We all have certain moments at one point in our life that make us grateful just to be alive. Moments that make us realize that no matter what happens, we're still lucky to be here in our body on this earth. For some, it's seeing others in incredible hardship, or narrowly making it out of a horrific or life-changing accident. However, a select few that go through these experiences are able to turn their hardest moments into an inspiration, to prove that no matter how hard you get knocked down, getting up is the only part that matters. With that in mind, James Conner's ongoing story of overcoming every type of adversity thrown at him has rightfully become one of the most incredible journeys in the NFL. And today, I'm excited to talk about his career thus far. As a man who's beaten cancer and recovered from multiple injuries and setbacks, Conner is a player who has proven that time and time again, you're not limited by your circumstances, and only you are responsible for the way that you respond to life's constant trials and tribulations. Before we get into it, make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell icon for this channel. I post a new video every Friday on a different player or topic, so you definitely don't want to miss out. To kick things off, let's go back to long before Conner's life was based on breaking tackles every Sunday for the Pittsburgh Steelers. As a kid growing up in Erie, Pennsylvania with 4 older brothers, James Conner was constantly in an environment where it was either fend for yourself or be trampled over every day of the week. That youthful intensity would build as he grew up, and after starting to play football, his physicality became his greatest strength. But his main position wasn't always a tailback like you might think. He was an outside linebacker. In fact, he didn't start at running back until his senior season in high school. But after having led McDowell High in tackles for loss as a junior, he already knew exactly how to think like a defender. So he knew from the start how to make opposing defenders hate their lives.
Come on, bro, you gotta go harder than that, baby. You gotta go harder than that.
After a solid but not jaw-dropping final season in high school, Conner didn't really receive any Division I attention apart from the schools in his area, like Toledo and Bowling Green. But those schools were only interested in Conner as a linebacker prospect. Only one offer came in that gave him an opportunity to continue playing running back, and he decided to take a leap of faith and continue playing the position he'd quickly grown to love. James Conner signed with the Pittsburgh Panthers, and immediately had to face an uphill climb as such an inexperienced back on a team that had recently joined the ACC and was still trying to prove itself. But his non-stop work ethic would carry him into a lead role pretty quickly, and he led the team in rushing yards in his true freshman season. Though he showed flashes of greatness from time to time, none was more encouraging than in Pitt's final game of the season in the Little Caesars Pizza Bowl. That's a terrible name for a bowl game, just by the way, but nevertheless, Conner exploded for 229 yards, breaking Tony Dorsett's school record for a bowl. In the following season, he played better than anyone anticipated, averaging 5.9 yards per carry and having 6 games over 150 rushing yards and 3 games over 200 rushing yards. Every week he'd be back in the film room to try and figure out how to more quickly hit the hole and finish at the point of contact, and that wrecking ball style would earn him some serious acclaim as a coach's first-team All-American and the title of ACC Player of the Year at the conclusion of the season. Conner's stock was only continuing to rise, and heading into his junior year, he was ready to add new elements to his game's weak areas that would make him an NFL-ready prospect. In Week 1 against Youngstown State, Conner got off to a lightning-fast start, racking up 77 yards and 2 touchdowns on only 8 carries. But in the process, Conner would plant awkwardly and suffer a torn MCL that would end his season. He was devastated having to watch his team go out and play without him on the field for the first time since he began playing football, and that injury had now shifted his focus away from becoming NFL ready to just being able to run the football again. What James Conner didn't realize at the time though was that he'd later thank that MCL tear for saving his life, because even though that didn't make any sense at the time, while he was training to get back to full strength after his surgery, Conner would feel increased pressure in his head, like it was constantly swelling up. But when he'd go home from the gym, he'd be unable to sleep, and if he did, he'd wake up drenched in sweat. While he thought it might be the flu or some other simple illness, after a few doctor's consultations and tests, there was a much more frightening diagnosis revealed. In December of 2015, at just the age of 20 years old, James Conner was diagnosed with a type of cancer called Hodgkin's lymphoma, after a 15-centimeter mass was found in his chest. All at once, the thought of cancer itself, which had seemed so distant and something that he wouldn't have to worry about for a long time, was right in front of his eyes on a computer screen. For the first time in his life, the game he loved most and his dream of making it to the NFL seemed like it might be taken from him. But he was never about to give in to that idea. Immediately, Conner and his family made the decision to pursue an aggressive 12-treatment chemotherapy plan over the next few months to try and get James completely cancer-free. And while that's always easier said than done, he never once for a second doubted his odds. Now, anyone that's been affected by cancer personally through a family member, or especially if they've had their own battle with it, can tell you how brutal of a process it really is. But Conner continued to push through, despite the constant pain of accessing a port implanted in his chest and the familiar nausea that accompanied each individual treatment week after week. Up against the growing weakness and fatigue, he would do everything in his power to fight back against it. But he was never alone in the fight either, with an outpouring of support from celebrities and cancer survivors from around the country, like All-Pro safety Eric Berry and former Bears running back Merrill Hodge, who had both gone through the same experience with lymphoma. Berry and Connor became particularly close, often texting to help James through the grueling process week by week. But even though he was becoming nationally recognized for his battle with cancer, Connor never wanted it to define him as an athlete specifically. And just a month after beginning treatments, he was back in practice with his teammates at Pittsburgh, despite having to wear a surgical mask to ward off infection due to his compromised immune system. Just imagine that kind of motivation. If your teammate's out there busting his ass right after a chemotherapy session, you literally cannot give a single valid excuse. Connor's no-quit attitude would push him straight through those treatments, and by May of the following year, James Conner was cancer-free. He'd overcome not only an MCL tear, which is a terrible injury in itself, but cancer itself. And with those immense obstacles now in the past, he was ready to set his sights on playing for Pittsburgh again in one final season. In his first game back in the season opener, he'd score a touchdown using his trademarked stiff arm, and after one of the toughest years anyone can experience, James Conner was back on the field and back in his element. There was obviously going to be some time needed to get back to 100%, but after putting in extensive work to get back to normal, nearing the end of the year he'd have an explosive performance against a number 2 ranked Clemson team. His 132 yards and 2 total touchdowns would play a massive role in handing the year's only loss to the eventual national champion. Conner would finish his final season at Pitt with over 1,000 yards and 16 touchdowns, earning a nod at first-team All-ACC for the second time in his career. And from there, he had his eyes set squarely on the NFL draft. He didn't have an explosive performance at the Combine, but team scouts knew exactly what they were getting in Conner. By far one of the toughest players in his class, and a pure power runner who was clearly capable of moving the pile at the next level. And even more than that, he was a man who was greatly respected for his heart and his mental fortitude. That's exactly why when April rolled around, Conner would be taken above his projection as a 5th or 6th round pick, getting the call from the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 3rd round at 105th overall. After playing 3 seasons on Heinz Field for the Panthers, he'd be staying home to achieve his NFL dream in the exact same stadium. And it was a perfect fit not only as a story, but also on the field, as Pittsburgh has long appreciated hard-nosed power backs in the cold of the AFC North. In his rookie season, it was more about growing as a player for Conner than anything else. Playing behind one of the league's top every-down talents in Le'Veon Bell, he didn't see that many snaps as he was still limited as a pass catcher and blocker, things that Bell has always excelled at. Another blow would be dealt to Conner's growth as a back late in the season, as he would tear his MCL yet again, this time in the opposite knee. But he was no stranger to having to fight to get back on the field, and after strenuous rehab, Conner returned to OTAs with a new opportunity waiting for him on the table. The team's aforementioned star running back, Lev Bell, was in the middle of a contract dispute during the offseason, and after the two sides were unable to reach an agreement, the team placed a franchise tag on Bell, meaning he'd be playing for a salary less than what he wanted, putting his health at risk in the process. That decision would see Bell protest by sitting out of training camp, something he'd done the year prior when a similar situation arose. For once in what seemed like centuries, James Conner had received a stroke of good fortune, and was finally able to practice as a first-team player through the offseason, greatly improving on his abilities as a runner, blocker, and pass catcher. All the while, Conner had become one of the most beloved faces in the Steelers locker room and among the fan base, and rightfully so, as not a single player on the team was about to outwork him. When the regular season arrived, Bell still wasn't in sight in Pittsburgh, or the entire state for that matter, and he wouldn't return to the team for the entire season, leaving the door wide open for James Conner to take the starting role. Conner soon set the NFL on fire with some of the most complete running back play in the league to start the year, and despite the Steelers facing struggles early in the season, Conner was a consistent bright spot. He racked up nearly 1,100 total yards and 10 touchdowns through just 8 games, and behind excellent blocking from the Steelers' offensive line, he was able to consistently make the first defender miss and get to the second level. But it wasn't just his ability to run the ball that made an impact for the team. Trying to fill the shoes of Lev Bell meant he was going to need to greatly improve on his pass-catching abilities, and after having not caught a single pass in his rookie season, his sophomore campaign saw him racking up 55 receptions, tied for 10th at the position despite only playing 13 of 16 games. By the time the season was halfway over, everyone on the Steelers had all but forgotten Le'Veon Bell's name, as James Conner had proven to every doubter that he could play at just as high of a level for the team. After an excellent season, he'd earn his first Pro Bowl nod, and though Conner's breakout year would end in a sprained ankle late in the year, there's nothing but positive energy surrounding Conner's position on the team here in the 2019 offseason. That certainty is something the team desperately needs, especially with all the drama that's been swirling over the recent weeks/months. He's become the embodiment of a Pittsburgh running back, from his mental toughness of overcoming all odds in the heart of the city, all the way down to his powerful running style, and the city and fans have rightfully embraced him for that. And on a Steelers team that faces a lot of uncertainty coming into the next season, there's just one thing that's for certain. No matter what obstacle is up next for James Conner, it pales in comparison to everything that he's already overcome.